Hello, horror fans, and welcome to the Script to Scream podcast, where we delve into the spine tingling world of horror cinema. Each week, we look at the scariest scenes, unmask the deeper meanings behind your favourite horror films, and explore the psychology of fear that keeps us coming back for more.
From script analysis to scene breakdowns, we'll be dissecting your favorite horror movies to see just what makes them tick. So, whether you're a seasoned horror aficionado or just starting to explore the genre, join us as we unravel the spine tingling stories that haunt the silver screen.
As always, I am Will.
And I am still Lee.
So, how are you, Lee? How's it hanging? It's good to see you again. What have you been watching this week?
Yeah, I'm good, brother. I'm good. This week I watched Oz Perkins' The Monkey, which was hands down the funniest film I think I've seen in years. I mean, I actually laughed out loud. The miserable, dejected soul that I am, and that very rarely happens.
So that's cool, man. I've heard a bit about the monkey. This is based on the Stephen King short story.
Yeah, that's the one from 1980, I believe.
Yeah, and Osgood Perkins, obviously the son of Anthony Perkins of Psycho fame, so some horror pedigree there. He directed Longlegs as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And I heard the monkey has quite a blackly comic vibe, so that obviously tickled your sense of humor there, Lee.
Yeah, I think my humor definitely sits on the darker side, that's for sure. What about you, bud? What did you catch this week?
Well, this week, dude, in prep actually for a little bit this week, I watched a few films I thought might be somewhat, or might have been somewhat of an inspiration for what we're going to cover this week. So I rewatched some old Hitchcock classics. Speaking of Anthony Perkins, I watched Psycho, which I thought was most appropriate. As I was watching Hitchcock, I can't resist watching Rear Window. So it's a film I just love. And then I went back and watched Dial M for Murder too. And I think if you're a horror fan, any Hitchcock film from that kind of early 60s, kind of 50s era is really worth a watch just to see and appreciate how a master kind of manipulates the mechanics of cinematic tension.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you throw the word master around sometimes, but it is genuinely 110% deserved in Hitchcock's case, without a doubt. So, anyway, what is strapped to the table for dissection this week?
Well, Lee, up for dissection this week. It's another one of your favorites, I believe, and one of the most successful horror movies of all time, the original and best, John Carpenter's Halloween.
Oh, nice. The movie that launched the slasher genre and gave us horror icon Michael Myers.
Yeah, groovy, baby.
And not that one.
Oh, I know. I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. So you're saying Halloween was the first slasher. I think I may have to disagree with that assessment, Lee. I think Psycho, 1960, possibly is a contender, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, didn't they come first?
Texas Chainsaw, yeah, it does predate Halloween by 4 years, I think. But personally, I don't really view it as a slasher movie.
Okay, so enlighten me there, Lee.
Well, as we'll talk about in a bit, it doesn't really fit into the rules laid out in the slasher template. Plus, in my eyes, Texas Chainsaw is its own unique beast. It's very raw. And to me, it's kind of more about the effects of industrialization and the legacy of violence in the family dynamic, that kind of thing.
Ah, okay. So a unique kind of theme and tone. You think Texas Chainsaw is justifiably off the table as the originator of the slasher genre?
I think so. I mean, Halloween was a culmination of a lot of great influences. It's almost like looking back on a delightfully macabre family tree. So, how about if you would let's look at this from a slightly different perspective. Rather than arguing what the first true slasher was, I prefer to acknowledge what came before and what led to the culmination that is Halloween and the slasher genre.
Okay, so you've piqued my interest, Lee. So carry on with this line of thought.
So, obviously, the big one, as you mentioned, is Psycho.
Yes.
And one that undeniably changed the face of cinema forever. Though there were precursors that came before, such as The Bat and The Leopard Man. Uh, Twisted Nerve came a little after Psycho and further developed the mentally disturbed sort of movie killer trope. Peeping Tom is another one, also helped popularize the killer's POV shot, which would become integral to the genre. And then we had like an entire subgenre, the giallo style, which dwelled on stylized murders and often kind of features semi-erotic content, thus pre-enforcing the sex and death motif of later 80s slashers.
Yeah. Did you know the term giallo means yellow in Italian and refers to the covers of cheap novels upon which a lot of the films were based?
I was not aware of that.
Well, there you go, Lee. See, movie pub quiz. I'm your man.
Have you ventured down the Gallo rabbit hole at all? And if so, do you have a favorite? I mean, for me, I think it's probably Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, which I think was absolutely a further inspiration for the Friday the 13th saga.
Saga.
We are not having this argument again, are we?
Okay, no, sorry, Lee. I'll behave. I'll behave. I haven't explored it a lot, to be honest. I have seen some, so I guess a few of the classics of the genre. So, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which I know is a touch early, maybe, but I think established some of the giallo tropes. Suspiria, and I think I told you before, Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill and Body Double, but I haven't gone too much further than that, to be honest.
That's still a pretty respectable dive into the genre, mate. I'm impressed. The final piece, though, to our Halloween shaped puzzle is Bob Clark and Roy Moore's 1974 classic Black Christmas, which had a huge effect on Carpenter and inspired him pretty much to create Halloween.
Okay. So you mentioned a slasher template and the rules. Do either of these have anything to do with why you've chosen this film, Lee?
Absolutely. I mean, I chose Halloween because whether you agree it is the first slasher or not, it is definitely the first to clearly define the rules of the slasher genre, which we'll be looking at as they are introduced throughout the film. And secondly, I chose the film because Halloween is a great example of what I like to call the hype man trope.
Okay, not familiar with that one.
Okay, so the hype man trope is when a character is introduced later in the film after being hyped up by someone else, or someone whose backstory is provided by a secondary character who serves to hype up the audience for their arrival or pending actions.
Okay, so like the Russian mob boss in John Wick.
Exactly like that. As Michael Myers doesn't talk, one of the scariest things in the movie is hearing Dr. Loomis continually tell us just how dangerous he is. It's a fantastic method that we as screenwriters can use to prep audiences for a significant character's arrival and predispose their opinions of that said character. And for the final reason, Halloween was filmed on a notoriously low budget. So we'll be looking at how Carpenter and Hill were able to maximize the scares while spending minimal dollar.
Okay, so to summarize, we'll be looking at the introduction of the slasher rules, how to use a hype man, and how to craft scares with little need for expensive set pieces.
Bang on the money.
Excellent. So just before we move on, Lee, we've talked about show, don't tell. Do you have any thoughts on the effect Loomis telling us about Michael has rather than seeing how dangerous Myers is?
I think it's the power of stories, dude, like myth and legend. There is a raw, innate power in storytelling mythology, and even more so from someone, Dr. Loomis's experienced character. I mean, think back to when you were a kid and monsters were real. Did you have like I don't know, like a local legend or a boogeyman that kids would whisper about in the playground?
Yeah, honestly, I can't think of anything specific, but do go on.
Poor sheltered child. For us, the local ruined fort was haunted by the ghost of a little drummer boy with black eyes. And if you ever heard drum beats in the woods, you ran like a son of a bitch. Of course, when you're a kid with an overactive imagination, every woodpecker, raindrop, and creak of a tree sure as hell started to sound like a drum beat. But I digress. But as as a species, we are innately designed to be affected by stories told around campfires, whispered in the dark. It's how we learn to evolve, how we warned one another of danger, and I think it's something that affects us on a primal level.
Yeah, love me a bit of primal level, Lee. Love it. Okay, so interesting point. So I remember Halloween as being very atmospheric, very focused on a kind of looming tension and pretty light on jump scares. So do you think this will hold up to the 10-minute rule we've discussed previously?
It'll be interesting to find out. I suspect it might come up a little light, especially in the first half, but we'll see.
Cool. Okay, well, let's take a look. So, Halloween was released in October 1978 and filmed on a budget of around $325,000. It would go on to make over 47 million at the box office and spawn 12 sequels and counting. This, coupled with the revenue earned from these, makes Halloween one of the most successful horror franchises of all time.
Deservedly so. And we'll be comparing the movie to an undated copy of the script written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill and weighing in at 107 pages. And as always, we are using these documents for educational purposes only, and all rights remain with their respective creators and owners.
All righty then, let's get cracking with John Carpenter's Halloween. 15 years after brutally murdering his sister on Halloween night, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to Haddonfield, Illinois, to unleash a new wave of terror. As his relentless killing spree unfolds, an obsessed doctor and resilient babysitter must fight to survive the night and stop the unspeakable evil that lurks behind the mask. So, we open on a black screen, the title music kicks in, and the opening titles begin as the title is superimposed in pumpkin orange Halloween.
John Carpenter's Halloween.
Of course, the big JC. And why is it that John Carpenter has his name above the title, Lee?
As far as I understand it, there are a couple of reasons. The first, I think, is to solidify himself both as an auteur and as the main creative force behind the film. The main reason, I think, is to emulate his hero, legendary film director Howard Hawks, who Carpenter publicly idolizes. Hawks was known for having his name before the title of his movies, and I think Carpenter adapted this practice as both a calling card and an homage to his hero. And while we're still on the title sequence, this is one of the few scripts I've read which actually includes and describes the title sequence itself.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah, I love the fact that Carpenter is paying homage to his hero. And I think, Frank Capra, of course, he was well known for having his name above the title. Hitch also, pretty effective at creating a brand around himself, which I think was an influence here as well. But you see Carpenter as an auteur?
Don't you?
I do actually. I think I do. I mean, being a bit of a film geek, I have sort of actually studied auteur theory a fair bit. So the theory emerged in France in the 1940s and 50s and was promoted by film intellectuals through publications like Cahiers de Cinéma. And that's a magazine that members of the French New Wave movement were sort of involved in. It's worth reading Andre Bazin and Alexandra Astruc, as well as Andrew Saris, who popularized the theory in the States. But the theory loosely sees the director as the central figure comparable to a literary author who molds a film to reflect their personal artistic vision. You tend to see folks dubbed as auteurs as having quite a recognizable visual style or becoming known for a specific genre. So Hitchcock, obviously, we've mentioned, is a prime example of this. So not to be too much of a, film history wonk, the lesson is over, but I do agree that by that metric, Carpenter can be seen as an auteur. That said, I do have some issues with the theory, not least that I think film is, it's such a collaborative medium, and I believe for the most part works best as such.
Yeah. One other thing I have to mention here is the theme music. And this is the first time the world was introduced to that iconic music, also composed by Carpenter. And it is so perfect. It has remained a trademark of the series, unchanged for over 40 years. Also, and this isn't technically one of the big slasher rules, but the big three, Freddy, Michael, and Jason, all have distinct and enduring themes that help them to stand out from the masses.
Yeah, and it's a remarkably catchy little riff, isn't it, for sure, this one? And it does keep our toes tapping as we zoom in on the eye of the creepy jack-o'-lantern.
Did you notice how the nose is cut to look like a kitchen knife?
I did. Now that's a cool little detail, isn't it?
Interesting, in the script, we are zooming in on the shape mask rather than a pumpkin.
Yeah, so tell the good folks more about that.
But in the script and the fandom at large, when Myers is masked up, he is referred to simply as the shape.
Yeah, so I noticed that when reading the script. So what's your thinking on the reason behind this?
Ultimately, I think it's because Myers is supposedly pure evil, simply hiding in the shape of a man.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. So nice little superimposition on the title tells us that it's Halloween night, 1963 in Haddonfield, Illinois. So back to the film now, and we are treated to one of the most iconic opening sequences of all time, all shot from a yet unknown POV. It's night. We look in from outside a house as young Judith Myers and her boyfriend make out on a couch before heading upstairs for some good old premarital sex, Lee. The
Hey.
unknown watcher creeps in through the back door and retrieves a knife from the kitchen drawer before retreating to hide from Judith's boyfriend as he leaves for the night.
I gotta laugh at this bit. Like the guy is all cocky, and Judith is like, "Will you call me tomorrow?" Now, I'm not trying to rag on the guy, but from the time the bedroom lights went out to him heading downstairs was 1 minute and 11 seconds. I think if I were young Judith, I'd be more like, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, loser."
Yeah, it seems our strapping lad's idea of foreplay is definitely limited to something out of a football playbook. But embrace yourself, Lee, because I'm about to blow your mind. I have an unlikely defense for our poor two pump chump.
Okay, I genuinely can't wait to hear this.
Okay, so when our stalker collects his knife from the kitchen, the time on the clock reads around 9:25. But, and this is a huge but, upon passing through the living room, if the clock there is to be believed, some 25 minutes have passed.
Holy shit.
Yes, so it's entirely possible our POV stalker is something of an unreliable narrator, and the passage of time as seen through their eyes has been compressed or distorted.
Or there is a broken clock in the house.
Yes, this is also a possibility.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go and check that out. I can't believe you spotted that. I think I must have watched this film like 100 times. I feel shame, deep, deep shame.
No, don't feel any shame, Lee. Sometimes familiarity breeds complacency. But nevertheless, with our questionable lover out of the way, our unseen intruder heads upstairs, where they don a discarded clown mask, and our POV is narrowed to a pair of sinister eye slits. After creeping through the upper rooms, the masked stalker encounters a nearly naked Judith who names him as Michael. Michael then proceeds to stab the poor girl to death in a gloriously hammy death scene that is eerily reminiscent of Psycho, and which gives us our first proper scare of the film at, and what's the time, Lee?
Well, the sisterly slashing kicks off around about 5 minutes and 40 seconds. And it's funny you mentioned Psycho because its influence is clear throughout the film. And take a breath, because this is also where we encounter our first slasher rule. Rule one: no premarital sex.
Yes, a film utterly replete with Psycho references. Now back to the film, and the killer heads outside where he is unmasked by Judith's parents and is finally revealed to be a 6-year-old boy in a clown costume, Lee.
What an opening scene, man. Easily, easily one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue with that. So, from a technical standpoint alone, and considering the filming budget, getting that whole sequence in one take is really, really impressive.
It's actually at least two takes. I know for a fact one cut happens when Michael first dons the clown mask, and there are rumors that there are other cuts, hidden cuts in there, but if there are, I haven't been able to spot them.
Okay, yeah, so some really clever editing right there. So, how does this scene differ from the scriptly?
It's largely the same, except that in the script, Michael retrieves the mask from his sister's room rather than at the top of the stairs. Interestingly, the script also kind of spoils the reveal of Michael as a child and the nature of his crime, as Judith is written as the sister for her character description.
Interesting. Okay. But I guess this is a production draft, right? So, any need to kind of hook a reader is absent at this point.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I feel the need to validate myself after your Sherlockian powers of observation. So, another interesting tidbit of useless movie trivia is that the hands seen throughout the POV sequence are actually those of co-writer Deborah Hill. But also in the script, when young Michael is unmasked on the page, he is eerily calm with a slight smile on his face, whereas our miniature Michael on screen has much more of a shocked and bewildered expression.
Yeah. So, as amazing as this opening sequence is, besides the cost of suitable cameras back in 1978, there's nothing overly expensive on display here. So, no set pieces, no explicit special effects. You could replicate this today with a cell phone. Of course, therein lies the problem, right? You'd be replicating something that came before. But one thing I do love about low budget filmmaking is that it inspires this kind of innovation. I know, from the commentary again, the crew were running around, moving lights through the house as this kind of long take continues. And they just didn't have the resources to light the house entirely. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of low budget filmmaking.
Definitely.
Anyway, a new superimpose lets us know that the date is now October 30th, 1978.
A little under 3 weeks from then, a little me would be unleashed upon the world.
Oh, little Lee. So back to the film, and we join Nurse Marion and Dr. Sam Loomis. And guess who just spotted a couple of Psycho references?
Educate the uninformed, my man.
Sam Loomis was the name of John Gavin's character in Psycho, and Marion Crane was the character played by Janet Leigh, who, as I'm sure everybody knows, was the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis.
Give that boy a gold star.
Yes, pub quiz Lee. I'm your man, I'm telling you. So Dr. Loomis, of course, is played by the legendary Donald Pleasance in what would be one of first of several appearances in Carpenter films. The good doctor briefs Marion on the as yet unnamed patient they will be transporting. But I'm sure we can all guess who our mystery loon happens to be.
And this is where our hype man first comes into play. The dialogue is largely as written in the script, and it's here that Loomis begins to plant the seeds of just what Michael Myers has become. Marion, are there any special instructions? Loomis, just try to understand what we're dealing with here. Don't underestimate it. Marion, I think we should refer to it as him. Loomis, if you say so. Marion, your compassion is overwhelming, Doctor.
So Loomis makes it very clear throughout this scene that he never wants Michael to be set free. We get a brief little setup as he spots a matchbook for the Rabbit in Red Lounge to show us its importance. We, the audience, get a very clear view of it, and rest assured that payoff will be delivered later on. Trouble is brewing in the asylum, though, as despite the darkness and the pouring rain, there are mental patients wandering the grounds.
Yeah, that is never a good sign.
It certainly is not a good sign, no. And things get worse as they pull up to the main gate, which looks to have been torn open. Loomis disembarks to investigate, but no sooner has he done so than an escaped mental patient vaults onto the car and tries to throttle poor Marion, who is barely able to shake him off. She cowers against the passenger seat, but a hand smashes the window and she flees the car, allowing the patient, who, if you haven't guessed it by now, is Michael Myers, to climb inside and drive off. This attack is our second big scare scene and kicks off at dead on 10 minutes, which ironically puts it well within the 10-minute rule.
Did you spot the skin-colored wrench taped to the guy's hand?
I did. I guess those stunt windows are harder to break than we give them credit for.
Like you said earlier, the genius of low-budget filmmakers.
Yeah, improvise, adapt, and overcome, Lee. Speaking of which, how exactly did Michael, who, if I'm correct in assuming, has been institutionalized since he was 6 years old, learn to drive a car?
Well, you're not the first to ask that question, my friend. The most satisfying explanation, I think, lies in the tie-in novelization, where it is revealed that Michael, despite his mute, almost apathetic facade, is fiercely intelligent and learnt by observing the doctors and nurses that transported him between facilities during his long, long incarceration.
Yeah, that's as good as explanation as any, I suppose. Loomis checks on Marion before lamenting that he's gone from here, the evil is gone.
Interestingly, in the script, this line is delivered slightly earlier after Loomis interrogates one of the wandering mental patients. It goes like this. Marion, what did he say? Loomis, he asked me if I could help him find his purple lawnmower. Marion, I don't think this is any time to be funny. Loomis, he said something else. It's all right now. He's gone. The evil's gone. Also, just after this in the script, we get the first mention of the shape. And that goes like this. Through the rear window, we see a shape spring up out of the darkness, streak through the rain, and leap up on the rear of the station wagon.
Yeah, so for now at least, the danger has passed, and we transition to a relatively clear, sunny day in Haddonfield, Illinois. Not just any day, though, as the superimposition lets us know that this is Halloween Lee. Who would have thunk it? We meet
No way.
17-year-old Laurie Strode, played, of course, by the iconic Jamie Lee Curtis. She's on her way to school, but has to drop off a key on behalf of her realtor father. On the way, she meets up with 8-year-old Tommy Doyle, and the two discuss the impending night's babysitting activities.
Yeah, it's a nice little save the cat moment. We've barely known Laurie for a minute, and already we've been shown that she is a kind and a nurturing individual. She's someone that the audience is being conditioned to root for.
Yeah, I think Laurie's a safe bet for the Best Movie Babysitter Award.
Close second for me.
Really close second. Who possibly could be a better babysitter than Laurie Strode?
B.
B. You mean the homicidal, Satan worshipping murderess from Brian Duffield's The Babysitter?
What can I say, man? I like him a little psychotic.
One day, me and you are going to have a serious chat, my friend. But back in the film, and Laurie, alongside Tommy, drop off the key to the old Myers place. Both are unaware that they are being watched by someone inside the house.
Yeah, the script is really bang on with the description here. Check it out.
Through a front window, we see Laurie bending over the welcome mat. Suddenly, a dark shape, the outline of a man, leans forward, watching her. As she walks back to Tommy at the street, the shape moves to watch them, then fades back into the interior of the house. So, what I find really interesting here, Lee, is the use of underlining in the script to highlight the most chilling parts of this action block. So, a dark shape, the outline of a man, and the shape moves to watch them. So, why underline these lines in particular, Lee, do you think? Is it to highlight the scarier moments of the scene?
I actually have a fairly concrete answer for this one. When you first pointed this out to me, I backtracked through the script to see if this technique had been used earlier, and it has. Carpenter and Hill use the underlines to highlight every action that the shape takes throughout the script.
Ah, now that is interesting. That's a great spot, Lee.
You spotted it, but I just filled in the blanks. But the question now is why?
Yeah, so this could be a shooting thing, a stylistic choice, but I think maybe it's to help keep track of the film's scarier moments. It could also be visuals Carpenter knows he wants in the film. But at the risk of repeating ourselves, we go on about the 10-minute rule all the time, and maybe this is the writer's way of keeping tabs on it, or some similar system of their own devising.
Nice, nice. Do you think this would count as a scare?
It's a good question. With the music cue and the creepy silhouette, I think yes, just about. But I think more likely this is a tension builder. It's giving the audience information our protagonist doesn't have.
Okay. So anyway, this one clocks in at 13 minutes and 45 seconds. And like you said, it's a mild one, but enough to keep the audience on their toes. And also, there's a tiny bit of extra dialogue in the script between Laurie and Tommy, but nothing of any significance has been cut here.
So up until this point, the scarology is well within the 10-minute rule.
Yep, so far so good. And I cannot stress how happy I am that that phrase is stuck.
Sticking around, Lee, sticking around. So, with that key delivered, Laurie heads off to school, unaware she is being watched by the shape. Meanwhile, we check back in with Dr. Loomis, and he's not very happily. After berating the head of the asylum for not taking strong enough precautions, he gets behind the wheel and heads for Haddonfield.
Again, our hype man is building up Michael's aura. Also, I couldn't help but notice that Loomis is parked in a handicap spot. Did you see a blue badge in his window?
I can't honestly say I was looking for that, Lee.
Fair enough. Well, besides some very minor dialogue changes, this scene is pretty much exactly as written.
So, why is it, do you think, nobody else seems to share Loomis's concerns about Michael's escape at this point?
I think you have to look at it from everyone else's perspective. I mean, they've known Michael since he was 6. He never makes trouble, never speaks, just kind of stares off into the distance, and he's been that way for 15 years. Yes, he committed a horrific act, but that's probably just words on paper for these people. I mean, what was it you said to me earlier? Familiarity breeds complacency. There you go.
Ah, there we are. Okay. So we rejoin young Laurie in class with what has to be the most uninspiring teacher ever, talking about the unavoidable nature of fate.
I know, man, I was almost lulled into sleep by her monotonously lifeless tone. This talk of fate, though, surely it has to play into the themes of the film, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is generally very little superfluous dialogue in good scripts. I think it's a fair shout. This debate about the nature of fate in some way plays into the themes of the film to a greater or lesser degree.
Later movies do touch on the theory that Michael and Laurie's fates are somewhat intertwined, as well as the sometimes enforced sibling connection that is explored in some of the sequels.
Okay, so Laurie glances out the window to see the shape watching her from across the street. The teacher asks Laurie a question, which, despite not paying attention, she is able to correctly answer. We know that besides being kind and nurturing, she is also smart. But when Laurie looks out again, the shape is gone, Lee.
In the script, it isn't stated that the shape is wearing a mask, and before coming to Laurie, the teacher actually asks the same question of another student who fails miserably to answer the question correctly. And we also see on the page that Laurie has written the words, Laurie Strode is lonely in her notebook.
Oh, poor Laurie. So is this a little on the nose, perhaps, Lee?
Definitely. But to be fair to angst-ridden teens across the globe, this is absolutely the kind of thing they'd probably doodle in their notebooks. Plus, it would have served to generate audience sympathy had it been shown.
Yeah, were your notebooks filled with teen angst?
Mine were filled with monsters and ninjas, and of course the cool S.
The cool S.
Dude, you must know what the cool S is.
Yeah, honestly, Lee, I don't know what that is. What is that?
Oh man, just Google cool S. I'd be amazed if it didn't ring any nostalgia bells.
Okay. Another suspicious Google request from Lee. I'm not looking forward to this. I'll have a look, Lee, and then we'll reconvene. Anyway, we're drifting off topic again. Big surprise. Back to the movie, and poor little Tommy is being harassed by bullies. Oh, Tommy, who are teasing him about the boogeyman and then smash his pumpkin.
Bastards.
Yeah, bastards indeed. And I feel there's a band name in there somewhere, but as the belligerent bullies flee the scene, one of them runs straight into the real boogeyman, the shape. Sadly, the bully escapes unscathed as the shape seems more interested in stalking Tommy.
In the script, this scene occurs after the scene with Loomis at the phone booth, and when the bully bumps into the shape, Michael drops a large kitchen knife, which he quickly covers with his foot. But with the musical stinger here, I'd say this definitely counts as a scare. What do you say?
Yeah, this is a jump scare for sure. And for the purposes of scarology, I'm going to clock this at 17 minutes and 18 seconds, so still keeping to the 10-minute rule. Now we rejoin Dr. Loomis, who is halfway to Haddonfield. He's stopped off at a phone booth to warn the sheriff, but happens upon a seemingly abandoned truck, some discarded hospital whites, and set up payoff a book of matches from the Rabbit in Red lounge. With proof
Uh-huh.
of Michael's destination in hand, he hurries back to his car, ignorant of the naked corpse hidden in the bushes nearby.
Interestingly, in the script, Loomis is actually on the phone to his wife here. Legend has it that Donald Pleasance thought Loomis should remain somewhat enigmatic in terms of his personal life and had the scene changed.
Yeah, I kind of prefer it that way. You know, it gives the impression that Michael has completely consumed Loomis's life.
Yeah, me too.
Any hint of family, I think, would have weakened that obsession. So, for anyone interested, though, here is that phone call as written in the script. Loomis, into the telephone. No, not since Thursday. Pause. Yes, yes, I'm all right. Stop worrying. After this, I'll sleep for a week, 2 weeks. Pause. I said I'm all right. Believe me. I'll be home soon. Yes, I do. Very much. I just have to stop him. Pause. Of course it's possible. But I know him, and when he gets there, God help us. Pause. Right, right. I'll call you. Me too. Goodbye.
Also, in the script itself, this scene takes place at a deserted garage, and Loomis finds that, and I quote from the script, On the padlocked door are huge marks like the clawing of an animal wanting to get in.
Mm. Back on screen, we check in with Laurie, who is walking home with her friend Linda, played by PJ Soles, whom horror fans will no doubt recognize from Brian De Palma's Carrie. Linda, incidentally, loves the word totally.
She says it 11 times in the film, 5 times in this passing scene alone.
Yeah, at least I totally knew you'd have the numbers for that.
Totally.
Yeah, joined by their friend Annie, played by Nancy Loomis, a Carpenter regular who also starred in Assault on Precinct 13, which is a movie I love, and The Fog.
Annie also happens to be annoying as fuck.
Totally. The lovely Annie yells abuse at a passing motorist, who is, of course, the Shape, stalking Laurie. Oh, the malignant motorist slams on the brakes, but after a moment's contemplation, drives off, and the girls continue their walk home. Eventually, Linda reaches her home, and the remaining duo are confronted by the Shape, who stands menacingly in the path ahead of them. And of course, Annie misses the whole thing. By the time she looks up, the Shape is gone. Annie goes to confront their would be stalker, but there's nobody there. So, would you say this is a scarely?
I think so. I mean, it may not be a jump scare, but it is definitely unnerving and would push the audience's heart rate up, no doubt.
Yeah, I'd agree. And at 23 minutes and 36 seconds, it keeps us well within the rule.
Hmm. What's really sad here is that Laurie confides in Annie that guys won't date her because they think she's too smart. And Annie is just like, nah, it's because you're a wacko.
Yeah, way to big up your unconfident friend, Annie. Well done. Good work. So, with Annie dropped off at home, Laurie bumps into Sheriff Brackett, Annie's father, before heading home. Once there, she heads up to her room and closes the windows, only to see the Shape watching her again from her lawn. Now, did you notice the poster print of James Ensor on the wall?
This is going to be one of those times where you make me look dumb by saying something really smart, isn't it?
Yes, yes, I am, Lee. So James Ensor was a famous Belgian painter notorious for his uses of macabre imagery and masks in his work. So quite a fitting little Easter egg for this film, I'd say, Lee.
Hmm. Uh, did you know Belgian buns aren't actually from Belgium?
No.
Yeah, I have knowledge too.
Once again, Lee, you dazzle me with your acumen.
So if we're classing the last shape appearance as a scare, this one in the garden has to count too, right?
Yeah, and this one clocks it in at 26:37. It's just for a moment, though, and he's gone. But then the phone rings and a nervous Laurie answers, but the only sound coming from the line is a muffled chewing. She hangs up, but a split second later it rings again. Turns out it was Annie on the phone, and they make plans for her to pick up Laurie later that night. Some time passes and Annie picks up Laurie.
In the script, this scene occurs after Loomis is visiting the graveyard, but is otherwise unchanged.
We're treated to the aforementioned graveyard scene now as Loomis, with a graveyard caretaker or possibly gravekeeper for a guide, visits Judith Meyer's grave only to find that her headstone has been stolen.
Oh man, Pleasance is so good here. There's like no surprise or shock. Everything he's expecting to happen is unfolding right in front of him. There's just this like resigned acceptance of what is happening and the knowledge that and unless he can stop it, things are going to get much, much worse before the night is out. Also, gravestones, man, they're bloody heavy. And the fact that it's implied Michael just pulled it up and walked off with it hints at a supernatural strength far beyond that of a regular man.
Yeah. So we rejoin Laurie and Annie as they light up a joint on the way to their respective babysitting gigs. Unbeknownst to either girl, the Shape follows behind them in his stolen car. Sheriff Brackett looms ahead, and the girls quickly stash the joint. It's clear that Laurie isn't used to smoking, whereas Annie is a seasoned pro, which leads us nicely to our next slasher rule.
Rule 2, no drink or drugs. In the script, this is all one long scene from Annie picking up Laurie to their encounter with Sheriff Brackett. It also plays out pretty much identically on the page.
I guess it was probably split for pacing issues.
Yeah, I'd say that would be a very safe bet.
So the sheriff is at a local hardware store, which has been the site of a break-in. He kindly informs us that someone has stolen some Halloween masks, some rope, and a couple of knives, and he blames it on the kids.
Yeah, if I was Annie's father, I'd blame most of my woes on kids too.
Yeah, me too. As the girls drive away, Loomis corners the sheriff and asks for a few moments of his time. As he waits for Brackett to finish up, the shape drives past behind him, Lee. It's a really well done shot here. No overt focus on the car. It's all beautifully natural. And yet, we, the audience, are in no doubt as to how close Loomis has just come to his quarry. We rejoin the girls on their drive as they talk about potential dates for Laurie at tomorrow's dance. Laurie confesses she'd love to go with Ben Tramer. Behind them, the shape follows. Quite how neither of them have noticed this car, literally 6 feet behind them, I have no idea.
Yeah, this scene isn't actually in the script. Instead, we get an establishing shot of a full moon to let us know that night has fallen, and we watch from the shape's POV as the girls arrive at their respective babysitting gigs.
Yeah, on screen, night falls, or rather plummets, as from the girls chatting about boys to arriving at their destinations, it is suddenly pitch black. Otherwise, it sounds largely as written. I find it interesting that despite the legacy of Laurie and Michael, he seems kind of laser focused on Annie at this point.
She is incredibly irritating.
Yeah, that is true.
Also, and I know it feels a little late, but I couldn't get my head around where else it would be. I'm going to put the end of Act One here. What do you say?
Yeah, when I was reading and watching, I thought Laurie sort of arriving in her bedroom and, just after bumping into Sheriff Brackett was about the end of Act One. But I think it's all a little subjective. So we rejoin Loomis and the sheriff as they investigate the old Myers place. Apparently, nobody has lived there since the murder in '63. They quickly discover a dead dog downstairs, and Sheriff notes that it's still warm, which leads us to this great little exchange from the script. Brackett, a dog. Both men look down off screen at the animal. Brackett bends down to it. Brackett continuing, still warm. He stands back and looks at Loomis. Loomis, he got hungry. Brackett gets a disgusted expression and steps away. Brackett, come on, a skunk could have killed it. Loomis, could have. Brackett looks back at the dead animal. Brackett, a man wouldn't do that. Loomis, he isn't a man. Interestingly, on screen, that last line is changed to, this isn't a man.
Yeah, it just goes to show that as far as Loomis is concerned, Michael isn't a human being anymore, if he ever was to begin with. Also, do skunks regularly kill dogs? Is that a thing?
Well, a quick Google search informs me that no, not really. I guess Haddonfield must have a major skunk problem if they're killing and eating dogs with any kind of regularity. Anyway, back to the film, and upstairs, Loomis talks the sheriff through the scene of the murder. No sooner is he finished when a loose rain gutter smashes the window.
Cheap little jump scare to keep our pulses up at 38:20, which then leads into this absolute banger. Loomis jumps back, reaches into his coat pocket, and draws a 357 Magnum revolver. Brackett stares at him. Loomis sees Brackett's reaction and slowly reholsters the revolver. Loomis looks at Brackett. I suppose I do seem a bit sinister for a doctor. Brackett. Looks like to me you're just plain scared. Loomis. I am. He glances around the bedroom. I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No conscience, no reason, no understanding, even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, or right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old boy with a blank, cold, emotionless face and the blackest of eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him and another 7 trying to keep him locked away when I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely, simply evil. Brackett just looks at him a moment. Brackett, what do we do?
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, but didn't you write about this dialogue as part of our MA?
I did. I cited it as one of the greatest monologues ever put to film.
Yeah, not better than Quint's Indianapolis speech from Jaws, though, surely.
Don't make me choose, man. That's just cruel.
So, what is it about this speech that appeals to you so much, Lee?
It tells us everything we need to know about these two characters, Loomis and Michael. And from the perspective of our hype man trope, it pretty much portrays Michael as evil incarnate, something hiding behind the visage of a seemingly harmless child, some unspeakable horror that is now loose in this innocent suburbia. And as for Loomis, we learned that he spent 15 years with Michael, first as his doctor from a place of compassion, trying to save him, and then as his jailer, trying to protect the world from him. It tells us that Loomis is dedicated, obsessive, even that he has the fortitude to ignore all the naysayers and disbelievers who don't see what he sees lurking within Michael, but rather some docile mental patient. But most importantly, we learn that he wasn't always like this. His initial approach was one of healing, but after spending so many years studying Michael, he is now so terrified of him that he pulls a gun at the first sign of danger.
Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it, how much you can pull from some really good dialogue. I still think, though, Lee, the Indianapolis speech is the greatest ever.
Yeah, I know, it is.
Yeah, of course it is. So back to the film, and Brackett leaves Loomis to guard the house as the doctor suspects Michael will return here at some point during the night. We then check back in with Laurie, who is reading Tommy a book when Annie calls. Turns out she set Laurie up on a date with Ben Tramer. Laurie is mortally embarrassed by this, but a bored Tommy spots the shape lurking outside the Wallace house. But of course, by the time Laurie looks, the shape is gone. Annie is having some trouble with the Wallace's dog, who is clearly spooked by something.
I love how she remarks she's the only person in the world the dog doesn't like.
Yeah, it seems he's not a big fan of Annie either, Lee. So Annie manages to somehow dump popcorn butter all over herself, so promptly strips off in the kitchen, causing the shape to move in for a closer look, the perv. But he breaks a ceramic garden pot and retreats into the shadows. The dutiful dog, who I think is a great guy,
Yep.
investigates the noise, and upon discovering the lurking shape, it leaps to attack, but is brutally throttled to death just off screen. Now, I'm not a big fan of on screen doggy death, but despite having to, yes, two canine comeuppances, they are at least tastefully done, Lee.
A nice bit of character height for the shape here, as Annie had previously mentioned that the dog loves everybody except her. Yet as soon as it discovered Michael lurking outside, it instantly went straight for the throat.
Yeah. Now, Annie, being the attentive babysitter that she is, completely disregards the dog's yelps of pain and ensuing silence, just happy that it is no longer annoying her. Regardless of her motive, it's a really great character moment and definitely a scare for me, which I'm going to clock at 44 minutes. So back to Laurie and Tommy as they settle down to watch Howard Hawks' The Thing from Another World. Lee, would you believe it?
Oh, talk about some serious real world foreshadowing there. Obviously, Carpenter would later go on to direct a remake of this movie and in the process create one of the greatest cinematic masterpieces of all time. Covered, of course, in season one of the Script to Screen podcast.
Laurie reassures Tommy that there is no such thing as the boogeyman, and if such a person were to exist, she promises to protect him.
Now, that is some good babysitting right there and reads exactly as it does in the script.
So back with Annie now, and she heads to the bottom of the Wallace's garden, where for some reason they have a shed slash washroom. Once inside, the door slams behind her, and we get our best look at the shape so far, and of course, the iconic mask. It's another definite scare, and it clocks it in at 46:17.
For the very few listeners who may not have heard the origin story of this iconic mask, it was indeed a repurposed William Shatner mask. Sprayed white, hair dyed, and the eye holes cut larger. The basic style of the mask has remained unchanged throughout the franchise, but there are many different takes on it throughout, and it has never looked as good as it does here.
Yeah, and let's face it, anything is better with a little bit of little bit of William Shatner in there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
whilst we're off topically, which iteration of the mask do you think is the worst?
For me, personally, it's Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers.
Okay, so hold on, I've got to Google this. Oh wow, yeah, that is pretty awful.
While we're on the subject, Rule 3: The Masked Killer. The killer in slasher movies is nearly always hidden behind a mask, either to conceal their identity or to symbolize the cold, emotionless evil within.
So the door slams shut again, and Annie finds herself trapped in the laundry room, and young Lindsay is too enraptured watching the thing to pay her any heed. And I just have to say, Lee, I love the use of negative space in this scene. So we have two pitch black areas in this room where anyone or anything could be lurking. And hailing back to our focus on how low budget filmmaking, this is a great way to instantly build and maintain tension for a minimal cost. And when you look at the majority of scares we've seen so far, that's all it is, the shape of a man lurking in shadows.
Yeah. Let's not forget the importance of the sound design in these scenes as well.
You know what? That's a great point, Lee. And to pull a phrase from your playbook, we'll put a pin in that and circle back to it in our breakdown. So Annie is still stuck in the laundry room when the phone rings, and freaking out that it might be Paul, she tries to climb out of the window only to get stuck. Back in the house, Lindsay answers the phone, and yes, it is in fact Paul, who sends the child to locate her errant babysitter. The young girl rescues Annie from her predicament. One phone call with her boyfriend later, and Annie unloads her young charge at Laurie's so her and Paul can engage in some slasher baiting premarital sex.
Oh, you can almost see the sword of Damocles hovering over her head now. On the way across the street to Laurie, the girls pass the shape as he pops up from behind a car with a nice little audio stinger. And this scare clocks in at 50 minutes and 50 seconds. Also on the page, it draws attention to Michael's weapon of choice. Check this out.
As the girls make their way down the street, the shape steps into the glow of the streetlight and watches them. He pulls a large knife from his pocket. The blade glistens in the light.
Yeah. The script has mentioned a few times now that Michael's weapon of choice remains a kitchen knife, just in case we'd forgotten.
So back on screen, Annie successfully unloads young Lindsay on Laurie before heading back across the street. Laurie comments to herself that the old Girl Scout comes through again. So I've noticed that Laurie has a tendency to talk to herself, Lee, which kind of makes sense, as you know, it's made clear that she is deep down extremely lonely. But as a rule, I mean, this is one screenwriting trait that really tends to annoy me.
How so?
I just think it's totally unrealistic, isn't it? I mean, how often do you actually talk to yourself? Oh, Lee.
Okay. So I don't talk to myself per se much, but I do have a really bad habit of testing and ad-libbing dialogue out loud, like a lot. I remember one time, and this is a true story, I was working through this evil villain monologue, like proper giving it a load of gumption and going back and forth, Gollum style. And I happened to look up, and my daughter's boyfriend is just like stood in the doorway staring at me.
That's brilliant, dude.
Yeah, I don't know how much, if any, of my obviously Sorkin-esque dialogue was overheard, but he did give me a pretty strange look. But back on topic, yes, I too hate it when characters talk to themselves, especially when it's really jarring, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think with the simplification required for streaming audiences, you know, I feel like this is something we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the
Yeah,
future.
simplification. Yeah, I like the word choice there. But you hit up on a really good point. Sometimes a little self-dialogue can be a handy way to catch the audience up or remind them about important plot points.
Yeah, I think anything can be useful if it's executed correctly, you know?
Mm.
So, with Lindsay deposited with Laurie, Annie heads to her car only to find the door is locked. So she heads back to the house for her keys while entertaining us with a delightful shanty about her love, Paul.
At this point in the script, Sheriff Brackett calls to warn his daughter of the danger, and I was really glad to read this, as it always kind of bothered me that he never even gave Annie a heads up. If, and you know, this may just be the horror veteran in me, I heard from a reputable source that a psychotic murderer was heading to town, I would be sure to warn or even evacuate my family post haste. But anyway, check out the conversation and see what you guys think.
Annie, hello? Oh, hi, Dad. Pause. No, just watching TV with Lindsay. Pause. Be careful about what? Pause. Well, if you won't tell me, how can I be careful? Pause. Sure, I will. Bye, Dad. Yeah, I feel the sheriff definitely dropped the ball a little here. But back on screen, as with no warnings to prepare her, Annie returns to her car and lets herself straight in without using the key. It takes her a moment, but she notices two important facts. The first, that the inside windows have all steamed up, and the second, wasn't that door locked, Lee? Boom! The shape rises from the back seat and strangles the poor girl before slitting her throat with the kitchen knife. We get some inadvertently hilarious facial expressions from Annie as she meets her untimely demise.
Beside Annie's cross-eyed death stare, this is a really cool kill scene, brilliantly foreshadowed by the open door and steamed windows. Yeah, it's enough to have the audience screaming at the screen.
Yeah, clocking in at around 53 minutes and 45 seconds. This is the Shape's first full on-screen kill since his escape, with the mechanic and the two dogs occurring mostly off-screen. Back at the Doyle house, the kids are watching Fred Wilcox's Forbidden Planet, another classically,
Mm.
when restless Tommy peeks out of the window while trying to scare Lindsay. He spots the Shape carrying Annie's body into the house and freaks out before Laurie manages to calm him down, still not believing him about the boogeyman.
She will before the night is through, though, I guarantee you that. In the script, the kids are watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers instead.
Nice. So, favorite version of Body Snatchers?
1978 Kaufman version, you?
Oh, Don Siegel, 1956, dude. I'm all about the old schoolie. So back at the old Myers place, and a lurking Loomis puts the fear of God into Tommy's playground bullies as they linger on the point of sneaking into the decrepit house.
Karma, you little bastards.
Yeah, you little fucks. So Loomis is joined by Brackett, who still isn't buying the whole escaped mental patient thing, but Loomis is convincing enough to keep the sheriff on side for now.
It plays out almost exactly as it does in the script, and once again, our hype man comes into play, although by now we've seen for ourselves just how dangerous Michael is. But I will read you this great extract from the script. Loomis. I watched him for 15 years, sitting in a room, staring at a wall, not seeing the wall, seeing past it, seeing this night. He's waited for it, inhumanly patient, hour after hour, day after day, waiting for some silent, invisible alarm to trigger him. Death has arrived in your little town, Sheriff. You can ignore it, or you can help me stop it. Bracket. More fancy talk. You want to know what Haddonfield is? Families, children, all lined up in rows, up and down these streets. You're telling me they're lined up for a slaughterhouse, Loomis. They could be. Bracket. I'll stay out with you tonight, Doctor, just on the chance that you're right. And if you are right, damn you for letting him out.
So outside the Wallace house, Linda and her boyfriend Bob pull up, half drunk and ready for a night of premarital sex. Lee, boom.
Dun dun dun.
So they've literally just rocked up, having arranged with Annie to use one of the bedrooms as a bonk shack, right?
Yep.
Yeah, classy. It gets worse though, as Bob states the following. Bob, okay, first I rip your clothes off. Bob grabs Linda and she starts giggling. The can of beer falls over onto the front seat. Linda, you idiot. Bob, then you rip my clothes off. Then we rip Lindsay's clothes off. I think I've got it. Linda, totally.
Hi, Bob. I'm Chris Hansen from TV's To Catch a Predator. Why don't you have a seat over there? But
So
hey, in all serious, Bob, what in the godforsaken fuck? Lindsay is 9 years old, dude.
Dude, that totally struck me when that happened. But anyway, so I was like, who's Lindsay again? Isn't that the kid? Anyway, so I'm sure it's meant to come off as harmless drunken banter, but yeah, yeah, kind of looking forward to Bob meeting the Shape, if I'm honest, at this point. So Bob carries Linda into the house where they quickly lose themselves in a makeout session on the couch while the Shape watches on.
I bet Mike was like, God damn it, how many kids do I have to kill to get this house to myself?
At least two more by the looks of things, Lee. Incidentally, this voyeuristic chill clocks in at 1 hour and 17 seconds for those of you keeping watch on such things. Laurie and the kids conclude their pumpkin carving, and a phone conversation with Linda confirms that the horny couple have the house to themselves. They need no further encouragement and head upstairs for some you know what, Lee. Cue some awkward teenage lovemaking, again unaware the Shape is stalking them. When the deed is done, whilst enjoying a post-coital cigarette, Linda sends Bob downstairs for more beer. It isn't long before he falls victim to the Shape, who throttles him one-handed and stabs him so hard he dies on the spot and winds up impaled to a cupboard door.
Couple of things here. Number one, the raw strength on display here proves without a doubt that Michael is something more than human. And number two, it's not just me, is it? But that knife is nowhere near deep enough in Bob's belly to impale him to anything.
Yeah, unless it's the longest kitchen knife in the world, which, having had a closer look at it pre-insertion, it most definitely is not, Lee. There's no denying it makes for a breathtaking visual, though, right?
Oh, agreed. And Michael's little head tilt as he appreciates his handiwork. It's just perfection.
Yeah, super sinister. So clocking this kill at around 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 35 seconds for the Scarology. Also, Bob died in part because he failed to heed the next slasher rule.
Rule number 4, don't wander off alone.
Yeah, there ain't no rest for the wicked, though, as we rejoin Linda upstairs. The shape appears in the bedroom doorway, hidden beneath a bedsheet and wearing Bob's glasses. Quite playful, I think. Linda, thinking it's Bob, teases the silent apparition before growing bored and phoning Laurie, at which point the shape advances and strangles her with the phone cord, while Laurie is forced to listen to her friend's murder at around 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds. So, something that occurred to me while watching this scene, Lee, is poor Linda probably died thinking that her boyfriend was murdering her.
To be fair, if Bob had turned out that way, I wouldn't have been surprised.
Yeah, yeah. So Laurie checks on the kids while pondering whether or not to check on her friends. At the same time, Loomis spots a familiar looking station wagon parked up the street, and upon investigation, he realizes it is the one Michael stole from the asylum. Shit! He realizes the shape must be close. Laurie, meanwhile, heads across the street to check on her friends.
Yeah, again, it's a little late, but I reckon that maybe start a back three here. What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking Act Two probably culminates with Linda's death. But yeah, somewhere around here, isn't it? Anyway, she finds the front door of the Wallace house locked and so makes her way around the back. She gets inside, but inside all is quiet and dark. Bob's body has been moved from the kitchen, Lee. She hears a noise from above and makes her way upstairs.
Oh man, here we go.
Yeah, boy, here we go. So Laurie enters the bedroom and finds Annie sprawled on the bed beneath Judith Meyer's tombstone and is illuminated by a burning jack-o'-lantern. Laurie backs up into Bob, whose corpse drops from the ceiling, suspended by his ankles. What the fuck's going on? Terrified, she backs up to a closet, which swings open to reveal, you guessed it, Linda's recently throttled body.
Man, things went south for Laurie really fast, didn't they?
Yeah, they went super south, didn't they? Totally quick. Okay, so I'm going to clock this whole sequence at starting around 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 40 seconds for the Scarology. Also, do you not find it a little convenient that Laurie, in her understandable distress, stumbles from one hidden corpse to another?
It's all part of Michael's plan, dude. He is an artist after all.
An artist, you say?
Absolutely. It was all beautifully prearranged by our pale-faced Michelangelo of murder, which incidentally leads us straight into our next slasher rule. Rule 5. Presentation is everything. What's the point in killing all these people just to leave their corpses lying around? No, oh no. They must be arranged so that when they are discovered, they inflict maximum shock value of the survivor slash audience.
Well, Laurie is definitely no fan of Michael's work. She stumbles into the hallway and tries to compose herself next to a darkened room. And wouldn't you know it, slowly, beautifully, the shape emerges from the shadows.
That's probably my favorite shot in the whole film. It is just perfect.
Yeah, it's a masterwork for sure, and really pays off all the negative space and shadow we've seen in the frame up to now. The shape attacks Laurie, slicing her arm with a butcher knife and sending her tumbling down the stairs. With little time to recover, and with the front door locked, she flees to the kitchen where she finds the back door jammed with a rake.
In the script, the back door is also locked, and so Laurie has to crawl through a window.
On screen, however, she smashes one of the glass panels on the door and shifts the impending garden tool so that she can make her escape. But the shape is still in pursuit. She tries a neighbour's house, but they are having none of it and pull the blinds down on the screaming girl, which is fucking outrageous, I thought, forcing Laurie to head back across the street to the Doyle house. She's misplaced the keys, though, and screams for Tommy to let her in as the shape crosses the street. Thankfully, the sleepy child opens the door in the nick of time, and Laurie gains a moment of respite.
In the script, it's made a little clearer just what happened to the missing key. Exterior Doyle House. Laurie rushes up to the front door. She reaches in her pocket for the key and drops it on the porch. Quickly, she bends down and scrambles for it. She looks back towards the street. Laurie's POV, street. The street is empty. The wind whishes the trees, leaves sprinkle down. Exterior, Doyle house. Laurie gropes around for the key. It lies over a crack in the wooden porch. She reaches for it, but her fingers nudge the key between the crack, down out of sight. Laurie screams with frustration and glances back at the street.
So Laurie sends Tommy upstairs to secure Lindsay and tries to call the police, but the phone is dead. Even worse, she now notices that one of the windows has been left open. The sound of the shape breathing fills the room as Laurie cowers beside the couch, from behind which Michael attacks Lee. The knife barely misses Laurie, who retaliates by stabbing her attacker in the neck with a knitting needle.
Go, Laurie!
With the shape seemingly dead, Laurie tosses away the kitchen knife in disgust.
No, Laurie, why would you do that?
I know, right? Well, the slasher rules weren't a thing back then, so I guess she doesn't know any better.
Speaking of slasher rules, Rule 6, the final girl. The most ardent of slasher tropes, the final girl, the purest and most noble heroine, must confront the killer alone.
So we rejoin Loomis now as he continues his grim patrol of Haddonfield streets. He informs Brackett that Michael is close. Back in the Doyle house, Laurie heads upstairs to check on the kids. No sooner has she reassured them that all is okay when the shape ascends the stairs behind her. She secures the kids in a locked room before hiding in a wardrobe, but her pursuer is relentlessly and smashes through the flimsy wooden door. Ever resourceful, though, Laurie fashions a weapon from a wire coat hanger and sticks her attacker in the eye before stabbing him with the butcher knife. Once again, the shape drops, seemingly dead.
Go, Laurie!
Go, Laurie! She emerges from the wardrobe, steps over the seemingly lifeless corpse, and once again tosses the knife away.
Fuck's sake, Laurie, come on.
Come on, Laurie. She retrieves the children once again, and this time sends them across the street to the neighbor's house to call the police. And she slumps Lee, exhausted. The shape lies motionless behind her until slowly, impeccably, it rises once again.
Another absolutely beautiful shot here. It's been copied and parodied so many times. It has lost some of its impact over the years, but seeing this for the first time all those years ago, I was blown away.
Oh, majestic cinema.
Mm.
So while Laurie remains blissfully unaware of the looming danger, the screaming children draw the attention of Dr. Loomis, who quickly realizes that this is the moment he's been waiting for. As Laurie staggers in a daze to the hallway, the shape attacks again, but in the struggle, Laurie is able to pull off the mask and reveal, bar the gruesome eye injury, a surprisingly normal Facely. As Michael struggles to redon his mask, Loomis shoots him and he reels back into the bedroom. Loomis follows and puts 5 more rounds, so that's 6 in total, into the shape, toppling the masked fiend from the bedroom window to land lifelessly in the garden below.
In the script, Michael never redons his mask, but otherwise it's pretty much identical.
We get one fantastic final piece of dialogue. Laurie, it was the boogeyman. Loomis looks down at her, then up at the shattered window at the end of the hall. Loomis, as a matter of fact, it was. So Loomis moves to the window, and to nobody's surprise, the shape is gone and evil endures, Lee.
Oh, banger, banger. So hit me up, my brother. What are your thoughts?
Oh, dude, this what a banger this is. I mean, there's no doubt. So I haven't watched this for probably 15 years or so, maybe even like 20 years. And I'm such a massive Carpenter fan. It was amazing to go back and rewatch it. I had forgotten how much Carpenter relies on building tension rather than out and out jump scares, but I think cinematically this film is a real masterclass and it deservedly is seen as one of the most important horror movies ever made, as well as being recognized for one of the films that established the tropes that we're all kind of so familiar with now. So it's worth noting that this was made by a bunch of kids, really, like operating on a shoestring of a budget, and was only Carpenter's third proper feature film. So obviously you love this film a lot, Lee. Are there any thoughts before we move to the dissection?
It's just so good. I mean, I know it's a little dated now, and the themes and tropes have been copied and mimicked into the ground, but this was the originator, not the imitator. And this movie had, as I've spoken about before, something of a profound effect on me. There's just something about the faceless evil that is Michael Myers that I find both terrifying and infinitely appealing. You know, but all right then, so let's break this baby down.
Okay, Lee. So as always, we'll begin the breakdown with a retrospective. First up, let's take a look at the so-called slasher rules that we picked up on throughout the film. So rule number one, Lee, no premarital sex. Rule number two, no drink or drugs. Rule number three, the masked killer. Rule number four, don't wander off alone. Rule number five, presentation is everything. And rule number six, the final girl.
Yeah, it's worth noting, I think, that this is by no means a definitive list. Screen, which obviously we're going to be covering in a future episode, has some different variations, but I feel this is a pretty good list of what Halloween specifically has taught us.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the genres develop as time passes, and obviously this list has been kind of augmented as audience familiarity grows. But it's difficult to kind of just overstate how influential this film is in establishing these rules, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that Scream treats the film with such reverence.
Yeah. So next up, the hype man. Now, I'd never really given this much thought, but watching this film with that in mind, I mean, it's really fascinating just how much Loomis does, largely via sort of exposition in instilling a genuine aura of dread and mysticism around Michael.
It's so good and so effective also. And this will lead into our next point quite nicely. It's very cost effective.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, it does sound like the opposite of show don't tell, though, right?
Yeah, in a way it is, but I think that old screenwriting trope gets thrown around a little too literally these days. I mean, yes, it's a very useful adage and one to always bear in mind, but sometimes you have to tell, and if you do it right, it can be incredibly effective, as we see here.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think if you're looking to build tension, having a character speak about a killer in the way it is presented in Halloween, especially if you have Donald Pleasance doing the descriptions, I mean, it's really effective. And it is what this film is all about, right? Building suspense, building tension. And finally, it's scaring on a small budget, Lee. So if you don't have the money, you have to play to your strengths and you have to be inventive.
Yeah, I mean, to use a phrase you and I have utilized in the past while pitching, everything here is street level. Suburbia, a handful of cops, some teens, and virtually no special effects. There's almost no gore in this film, no elaborate set pieces, just a small film executed to utter perfection. It's cheap, effective, and rightfully considered a genuine work of art.
Yeah, I also think the fact that this is taking place in suburbia shouldn't be overlooked
Hmm.
here on how it managed to connect with audiences. And it must have been in Carpenter's thoughts. The final shots, like with Myers kind of breathing, permeating the soundscape, is a testament to how Carpenter wanted to make the home and the safety of a nice suburban street an unsettling place of horror. Okay, so let's look at our characters. Are there any introductions that stood out to you as particularly effective or memorable?
Probably Loomis's for me. Let me just read it for you. In the passenger seat is Sam Loomis, a clinical psychiatrist. He is a tough looking man in his 40s who flips through pages in a manila folder. But if I'm being honest, I think the character introductions are one of the weaker points of this script for me. I mean, most of the female characters are written in just as like pretty or beautiful or total knockouts, with little else about them really brought to our attention. I mean, yes, at the time and arguably still now, pretty girls sell well to a largely male audience, but give them some depth. It's a small gripe. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. How about yourself?
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with that, Lee. That's a fair assessment, I think. But for me, it probably has to be the initial introduction of Michael Myers. So, just for the nerdy geekdom of what this represents in the history of cinema. So, check this out. Close shot, Michael, Crane. The father's hand reaches up and rips off the Halloween mask, revealing Michael, 6, underneath. A bright eyed boy with a calm, quiet smile on his face. Camera pulls back, revealing the blood-stained butcher knife in his hand. then further back, craning up past his parents standing there, up from the neighbour's house to a high shot of the neighbourhood as the sound of police sirens rise in the distance. Oh, holy, come on. That's an absolute banger.
Mm.
So before we break down the scarology, did you have any scariest moments in the movie?
I honestly don't think I have one, and make no mistake, that's by no means saying the film isn't scary. Rather, the whole atmosphere and aura that is built up around Michael, the mystique about him, who or what he is. For me, that's more terrifying than any specific scene in the film. But if you put a gun to my head, I'd say the scene where he kind of emerges from the darkness behind Laurie. That's where I'd put my money.
Yeah, yeah. No, honestly, I agree. That moment is so wonderfully executed. It's hard to think of anything to top it. The only thing that comes close, and again, bit of geekdom here, is Michael sitting up behind Laurie in the bedroom. I just love that moment so much. Okay, then. So let's talk about the scarology. So first of all, yes or no answer. Does the film more or less conform to the 10-minute rule?
Yes.
Fantastic. Let's break it down.
Okay. So we've listed 19 prominent scares, and with a runtime of 89 minutes, that averages out to just under 5 minutes between each scare. Now, of course, that's not taking into account the duration of the scare and all the countless moments of suspense in the film. If we compare that to our scarology, which can be found in the show notes, it holds up almost bang on the money. There is one point at which, from our POV, the film goes just over 10 minutes without anything overtly scary happening. This occurs from 26 minutes 37 to 38 minutes and 20 seconds, and is right around where I put the first act break.
Well, let us break down those acts for you. So, Act One opens with our face punch, Judith's murder, then reliably drip feeds us with scares every 5 minutes or so until the 26:37 mark. During this time, we transition into Act Two, and after a slightly dry spell, we kick off with the gutter smashing the window next to Loomis at 38 minutes and 20 seconds. And then again, we get scares every 5 minutes or so until Linda's murder at 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds. So then we plunge into Act Three, the first scare being when Laurie discovers her friends' bodies at around 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 40 seconds, and ending at 1 hour, 27 minutes, and 46 seconds with Michael vanishing from the lawn. Lee, so sinister. So that gives us a grand total of 6 evenly paced scares in Act One, 8 also evenly spaced scares in Act Two, and 5 in Act 3. However, the shorter nature of the final act does lead to these scares coming a lot thicker and faster.
Fantastic. Do you have any thoughts on the themes at work here in Halloween?
Okay, so nothing especially groundbreaking here, but I think if we're looking at our sort of beloved Parker themes, we have the fear of death kind of playing out pretty strongly here. Looking at it more broadly, I think, and this is what I alluded to a moment ago, Carpenter is playing with this idea about the danger present in the seemingly safe suburbia, or that suburbia has this ever present kind of dark side. I also think we're looking at Carpenter playing with the idea of Laurie's presumably kind of virgin status as being one of the reasons she's able to become the hero of the piece. We also have this idea of Laurie's kindness and empathy as being important. She doesn't eschew her babysitting responsibilities. She's very protective and consoling to Tommy and Lindsay. So Laurie's maternal instincts are also being played with here, I think. So Myers attacking Laurie brings these instincts to the fore, and I think that's really important thematically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think fear of death and fear of the unknown are unsurprisingly the two big ones here.
Also, I thought about the fate that we mentioned earlier, which
Hmm.
is obviously playing into this somehow. You said maybe plays into sequels as well later down the
Yeah.
line, but yeah, that's something that's obviously being played with as well. So, what, if anything, do you think you've learned from the script here, Lee?
I think the horror genre as a whole owes this movie a massive debt. I mean, it literally changed the landscape of horror and instilled in the genre a set of tropes and techniques that are still being used to this very day. For me, I think it's the power of words, man. I mean, if I take one thing from this script, it's about how important dialogue can be and how useful exposition is when done right. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, It was how Carpenter described the action. So we've talked about this before, and it can be especially prevalent in writer-directors' scripts, but Carpenter really lays out his shots here. He describes how he's going to build tension on screen. So going back to the auteur theory, we can see how, as a director, he sees the film and the stamp he's going to put on it when it's realized. I also think that this is interesting in terms of seeking investment as a writer director, as it could contribute to building confidence with investors that you have a vision and you know how you're going to make the film, and that it's already kind of been mapped out in your head and they can see that in the script. But I think the craftsmanship on display here is truly wonderful to read, and it's definitely worth a read if you are so inclined to do so.
Absolutely.
I must say though that something's been on my mind since our Saw episode, Lee.
Okay.
You mentioned briefly back then about the Halloween franchise's muddled history. So, can you give me a brief rundown of just how this chronology works? Because I dipped a toe in and it was almost bitten off.
Okay. Okay, but I will do my best. Okay, so obviously we have the original and best John Carpenter's Halloween, the film we've just spent over an hour talking about, and then you have no surprises there, Halloween 2, which continues directly on from the original, same night and most of the surviving cast. Then we move to Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which was an attempt to reinvent the franchise into kind of an anthology kind of affair, which would tell a different story each time. This one with an all new cast of characters battling an evil Halloween mask company.
Ah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it tanked hard. Despite having received a respite from fans in recent years, it was not well received by fans of Michael Myers in general. So then we were given Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, a much loved return to form, which brought back Donald Pleasance and introduced us to the niece of Laurie Strode, played by the insanely talented child actor and future Scream Queen Danielle Harris. Harris and Pleasance would return again for Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, which, to be honest, was pretty goddamn awful, despite a genuinely stunning performance from Harris as the PTSD suffering child niece. Rocking up next in what many believe would be the final nail in the franchise's coffin is Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Pleasance would return one last time but tragically pass away before reshoots could be filmed. The film tries to dig deeper into the supernatural elements behind Michael but fails disastrously on pretty much every level. It does feature a young Paul Rudd, though, as a grown up Tommy Doyle, so there is that.
Oh, okay. But this obviously wouldn't be the end of it.
You can't keep a good slasher down, and Michael Myers would return in Halloween H2O, i.e., Halloween 20 years later. Curtis would return to the role that made her famous, and all but the first two movies in the franchise would be ignored for continuity's sake. And this was a pretty decent attempt at returning to the franchise, and would be followed shortly afterward by Halloween Resurrection, in which Curtis returns briefly before being quickly killed off in a piss poor attempt to cash in on H2O's success.
Okay. So that brings us up to date.
Not even close, my naive compadre. With the dismal response to Resurrection, the decision was made to completely reboot the franchise, and we were thus blessed with the divisive Rob Zombie's Halloween, aka Hillbilly Halloween.
Hillbilly Halloween.
It wasn't really called that, but it did reinvent the original Halloween cast as a bunch of the most despicable and unlikable people you could pretty much ever hope to meet.
Okay, so you're not a fan?
Actually, I may sound like I'm shitting on it, but I actually enjoyed this movie. It's a far cry from the subtle masterpiece Carpenter gave us, but there is a lot going for it. Not the least, we get to spend a lot more time with young Michael before and after his incarceration. Also, Danielle Harris returns in adult form to cement her Scream Queen status, so it's worth price of admission for that alone. This was followed by Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Most of the surviving cast returned in this less well regarded sequel, and any hope of the franchise continuing in this form was shelved after this.
Dude, that's definitely a franchise with a lot
We're not
of.
done yet. We're not done yet.
Oh, for fuck's sake. You know, I wish I never asked now, Lee.
Too late to put me back in the bottle now because I am on a roll, baby. The franchise would stew for a while until 2018, the 40th anniversary, where we'd be given a brand new trilogy, again featuring Curtis.
Okay, so I thought she died.
Rebooting the continuity this time, ignoring all the previous sequels and following on 4 decades after the events of the original Halloween.
Okay, and what is this one called?
Halloween.
Oh, wait, so hang on a minute. There are three movies in the Halloween franchise, all just called Halloween.
Yep,
Jesus.
yep. Loved by pretty much everybody, Halloween 2018 would be followed by the less liked Halloween Kills and the pretty much universally disliked Halloween Ends.
Okay, is that it now?
Yep, that brings us up to date with the franchise.
Oh, thank God for that, dude. Okay, well, I think we're almost done here, but before we wrap up and talk about our next episode, what would you rate the script and the film here, Asley?
Okay, I know you're going to give me the evil stare after I gave last episode's movie a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to give Halloween a 9, simply because some of the actors' performances simply don't hold up. Otherwise, I would have so eagerly given it a 10. As for the script, I'm going to give it an 8.
Yeah, so for me, this is almost a perfect film. I think those performances, you're right, though. So I'd give it a 9 as well, I think, maybe a 9.5. You could argue the film is a touch slow now for modern audiences, and it doesn't deliver the thrills and spills and graphic violence to be expected from a modern day kind of horror. But you have to remember this film was made on a shoestring, and that is not what Carpenter is looking to deliver here. He's looking to deliver tension and suspense. And this film pulled from the greats and delivered something that would define an entire genre moving forward. The script I thought was maybe an 8 as well. Some dialogue is a bit on the nose, but the vision is there. The action, how the tension is going to be built is so kind of explicit. And it's really pretty masterful. And you can see how this fed into the finished film as well.
Okay, so that gives 17.5 out of 20 for the film and 16 out of 20 for the script. I think that's a pretty fair score, to be honest. How about you?
Yeah, I think we've done well there, Lee. I think that's pretty fair, dude. The script is good, but the film is just so well realized, I think. So I just want to say, Lee, before we sort of wrap up, that for anyone interested in cinema and film history, Halloween is generally a great jumping off point, I think. So Carpenter wears his influences on his sleeve here, and if you like this film, I'd implore you to go back and watch, the films of Alfred Hitchcock. Watch kind of Peeping Tom, watch A Touch of Evil. Thing from Another World, as we mentioned earlier, Siegel's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, everything, and I mean everything pretty much that Carpenter is doing here came from those films, giving the audience more information than the protagonist, negative space in the frame, the use of shadow, the use of POV, the long oneer at the start. What Carpenter was able to do was repackage all he had learned from these great masters and bring it to an audience in a fresh take on a newish kind of genre. And then you can go back and look at the Giallos and some of the films of Bava and Argento, their use of color, and see how that relates to directors like Hitchcock. Look at the films of Brian De Palma and how influenced he was by the masters as well. So just please go back, watch the greats because it's all there. So, Lee, that rant over. What are your final thoughts?
I mean, this movie is a timeless classic for a reason. It created a cinematic icon and universe that has endured for almost half a century. And like you said, if you want to learn more about horror or screenwriting, this is definitely the place to start. Another thing I just want to sort of bring back to the forefront is the music. I'd say Carpenter composed the score himself, and it is just perfect. It just works on so many different levels, whether it's a sudden shock value or just kind of a slow tension build or just a maintaining the tension. That sort of simple musical cue just works every time. It's just so good.
Well, that's great, isn't it? Yeah, and the other thing we were talking about, wasn't it, with the what you can see the kind of influence here on something like It Follows with the way that shots are composed,
Mm.
that looming kind of tension, the frame, how it's used, with the
Yep.
car following Laurie, for example, you sort of see
Yes.
these things in the background, people walking towards the camera, all that sort of stuff is you can see where the influence is being drawn from, and it's this movie, man. It's this
Yep.
film. Okay, so all of that said, what's on the agenda for next time, Lee?
Next time on the Script to Screen podcast, we'll be taking a deep dive into the Lovecraftian reimagined classic Reanimator.
Oh, dude, love me a bit of Lovecraft. Also, love me a bit of Stuart Gordon as well. This is going to be amazing. Okay, so if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit like, hit subscribe. And if you're feeling terribly, terribly generous, please rate and review on your podcast venue of choice because it really helps us reach new people. Go check out our socials and reach out because we love hearing from you. But Lee, until next time, do take care.
Have yourself some pumpkins and keep writing those scares.